Hey there, folks. In a soon-to-be-released entry in the wall-mounted computer series, I'll be installing a hardline water cooling loop from end to end. As part of that effort, I'll modify an Alphacool Distro Plate to function more how I want it to than how it was designed. Rather than waiting for the full video to make it through editing, I thought it might be nice to separate this portion and have it serve as a sneak peek into my loop building process. My favorite distro plate is the Alphacool Core Distro Plate 240 right for VPP/D5. However, there is a frustrating element to its design that I address prior to installation. When the pump is turned on, the return chamber will collect any air that was pushed through the loop and behave as a self-pressurized column, leaving the fill chamber to do practically nothing. Swapping the ports has no positive effect, but thankfully from my testing, this problem can be rectified in a few different ways. Bear in mind that if there isn't any air in the loop to begin with, there wouldn't be a problem, but this is almost never going to be true for the initial filling at least. Personally, I'd prefer that these two chambers exist as one, so that's what I'm going to make happen. I'll take the reservoir out to the shop and remove the 22 front plate screws. Once these screws have been removed, I'll lift the cover off and place it to the side, face down, on a clean paper towel. Next, I'll carefully remove the rubber sealing gaskets with the pointy end of a cleaning pick, being very careful not to puncture the rubber material. Now I'll cover the top plate and the gaskets with more paper towels to prevent acrylic shavings from getting all over the components and making the cleaning process before reassembly more difficult. To protect the reservoir, I'll apply masking tape over the entire surface and ball up some paper towels and stuff them in the channel openings so no acrylic shavings are flung deeper into the housing. I'll cover the channel openings with small pieces of masking tape as well. Now I'll orient the reservoir so the top is at the edge of the table. I'm no engineer, but if I had designed this unit, I would not have included this spine of acrylic here, which seems to do more harm than good. The folks at Alphacool are smart though, and I ain't, so they probably have a very good reason to have included it. But I'm going to cut part of it off to merge these two chambers into one. I'll use a Sharpie to mark the exact area where I'll remove the acrylic material. Ideally, this canal will be as high up on the reservoir as possible, without getting too close to the indented ridge that the sealing gaskets rest in. I'll place 4 1-inch washers in the bottom of each channel. These serve two purposes. The first is that if I slip with the Dremel, I won't mar the acrylic by putting gashes in it. The second purpose is to provide a depth gauge, so that once I am dremeling across the channel, I can be assured that I'm not going deeper than the washers allow. To make the cut, I'll use a Dremel and a 1/8 inch carbide carving bit. I'll slowly start cutting into the acrylic with small back and forth motions between the Sharpie lines. I'm looking to get as much of the material cut away as I can before I switch sides and come at it from another angle. Once I've cut the material down to the depth of the washers, I'll put a 1/4 inch sanding drum on the Dremel and now make slow back and forth passes on the acrylic to smooth out any imperfections. Once the shape is fully cut, I'll use 7000 grit sandpaper to smooth the edges. To sand the bottom of the canal, I'll make a U shape with the sandpaper and slide it back and forth in the slot. I'm being careful to avoid scuffing up the surrounding acrylic during this process. With the cutting and sanding finished, I'll use the pick to grab the washers and start to clean the reservoir. After removing the tape, blasting the unit with distilled water, and doing some acrylic crumb management, the reservoir looks like this. It's very important to make sure that any leftover shavings are cleaned up prior to adding the gaskets back and tightening them down. To ensure the gasket tracks are clean, I'll use lint-free electronic swabs to trace the tracks and remove any debris. Here's how the newly cut canal between the two chambers looks. Now I'll put the gaskets back in place, align the top cover, and reinsert all 22 screws. I use the EK loop torque driver configured to 0.6 Newton meters to reinsert these screws. This is less than Alphacool's stated torque of 1.5 Newton meters, but this wrench has worked just fine many times over for this process. I'll visually inspect the gaskets under the acrylic cover to make sure they are compressed fully. And finally, here is the completed reservoir, all prettied up with its dance shoes on. With the reservoir completed, I'll reassemble the loop and tinkle some water in the fill port. Now that both chambers share a common pressurization, the water level rises and lowers in tandem. Once the end-to-end flow is established, I'll continue to add water until the reservoir is completely filled. Since both chambers now connect to the fill port, I can fill and purge from the same port. I especially like that I can now fill the reservoir completely to the top, minus about 3/16 of an inch. To conclude this segment, I'd like to reiterate that I love this distro plate, and this small modification practically forces me to love it even more. I hope this short tutorial has been insightful, and do be on the lookout for episode 4 of my GES series to see how this modification fits into the overall water cooling narrative. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration. Thanks for watching, and out.